Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join this week's workshop series. For There's quite a few of you who are rejoining from last week, but for those of you who are joining for the first time, my name is Nitin Taran. I'm one of the curators of Open Atlas. So, Open Atlas is a 501c3 nonprofit, and our mission is to empower high skilled immigrants across admission, jobs, visas, life in the US, and more. We have a Slack community that's nearing 4,000 and growing. We have a newsletter that has around 40,000 weekly readers. And we do quite a few events like this. We bring in speakers who have perhaps secured an admit into an Ivy League or a prestigious program, who have cracked a difficult interview and gotten a job at a FANG company, or this week's session, it's going to be on work visas. So we are joined here by attorney Nusrat Ganberg. And Nusrat has a very unique background. So she actually worked at the USCIS for a few years before going into private practice. And in private practice, she's worked for leading law firms, Fragerman, Darren Silver and Associates, and Boundless. She has deep experience on multiple visa types, and our she's joining us today, and our time today is for all of you. So, in case you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat. And actually, there's about 20 of us, so we can be more interactive. So, in case you have any questions, feel free to raise your hands, and I'll ask you to unmute, so you'll be able to have some order to this, right? So, with that, I'll briefly ask Nusrat to introduce herself, share a bit more about her background, and maybe one piece of advice. So, if there's a high skilled immigrant today, Nusrat, who perhaps has recently graduated from a program, is on an F1 OPT, or they are on the F1 OPT STEM extension, what words of encouragement do you have? How should they look at the visa paths forward? And the other caveat I would add is perhaps they're from a country like India, which has like a backlog on multiple categories. So, what options are open to them?
Yeah, hello everyone. I'm happy to be here. So, as Nikin mentioned, I have many years of experience in immigration. I've been an immigration attorney for more than 18 years now, and I have worked with USCIS as an officer in the past as well. I've worked with Fragomen and boutique firms and larger firms as well. As far as what we sometimes call the extraordinary realm, so that includes O-1s and on the non-immigrant side, as well as EB-1s on the immigrant side. I have, experience kind of across a whole range of professions and creative backgrounds as well. So I've been based in LA for a long time, and so I've worked with people in the arts and film and TV, but also people in tech and other kind of research focused roles as well. Um, so, it's a broad kind of visa category with a lot of subparts that is open to a lot of people. So, kind of segueing into the words of encouragement or direction, I will say, don't count yourself out. There are lots of options out there in terms of immigration and lots of pathways. And even if something may not be available to you, tomorrow, it may be available to you maybe a couple of months from now with the right experiences. And don't rely on ChatGPT for legal advice. That's another another little word of wisdom there. But I'm happy to meet you all and talk with you about your immigration questions.
Yeah, I think quite a few people are shy, so I'll call them out one by one. But could you speak a bit more about the H-1B lottery in 2026? So it's going through quite a bit of change, and what can people expect? Because the lottery opens up for registration on March 4th, And I'm sure people are starting to reach out to have conversations with their employers, or maybe a lot of them are hesitant to have conversations with their employers. So, anything that they should keep in mind? And can you just briefly talk about what this new lottery looks like as well?
Sure, yeah. So there are lots of big changes, as is true for many different aspects of immigration, especially under this administration. But there's a new kind of weighting system in terms of like wage levels and how many kind of bites at the apple you get based on how your petition can be classified. If you're not familiar with H-1B, but maybe many of you are, there are various wage levels that are supposed to be determined based on the requirements of the position, and the individual that is being considered for that position, of course, has to qualify at that wage level as well. That's the second part of it. So the idea between these various H-1B changes and a lot of rapid H-1B changes is to ostensibly make it, more merit-based, and also to kind of prevent employers from taking advantage of the program to underpay people or pay them less than they would a US worker. And so that's the intent behind it. In terms of what people can expect, I mean, it is a lottery after all, so it is really tough to kind of count on it or expect that one would get an approval or an approved petition or selection. But I think if you or an employer is seeking H-1B for you, you're probably deep into the process already. We're now in February, so really you should have probably had those conversations with your employers already. But if you have questions about anything specific to do with the lottery, I'm happy to answer those. Let's see. It's
Ashish
a little
raised
bit.
his
Mhm.
Ashish
Sorry.
raised his hand. I think he has a question, but I'm sorry, no, sir. No, didn't mean to interrupt. Did you want to complete your thought on each one?
Um, yeah, that's okay. I mean, I was just going to add that, because of so much being new this year, it's kind of hard for me to predict. But yeah, go ahead, Ashish. How can what can I answer for you?
Hey, Nusrat, Ashish here. So, quick question. From the current, if you hold a current H-1B, how do you think about qualifying for something like an O-1 visa? And should H-1 be thinking proactively towards an O-1 application petition?
Yeah, I mean, the O-1 is a great option if you qualify, of course, and if you meet the criteria. So one of the benefits of an O-1 is that you don't have a cap. You can have as many O-1s as you like. And it may set you up a little bit better to eventually get an EB-1 petition approved, or perhaps an EB-2 NIW. There is kind of it's not exactly a self-petition. It's not supposed to be classified as a self-petition, but it's almost a pseudo self-petition where you can work with an agent and work with several different employers. So it offers more flexibility than potentially an H-1B. Um, it just kind of depends on what you're interested in doing. If you have entrepreneurial aspirations, it's a great option and definitely something you should look to because it allows you to pursue those kinds of endeavors. Whereas in H-1B, obviously, you're totally beholden to your employer and to that position that you were hired to, and in that location as well.
And
So it offers more
can you
flexibility and creativity.
and can you do it alongside while you have an H-1?
No, so you do, unlike having concurrent H-1Bs, which is something you can do where you can have multiple H-1B employers and have them be active at the same time. You kind of have to pick a status. So it
Mhm.
would be one or the other. But if you have an agent-based O-1, you can have several different engagements. So the way the O-1 works is that if you do an agent-based O-1, and let's say you're a consultant, you know, if it's an O-1 consulting kind of position, you would submit documentation of what you plan to do for the 3-year period, which is how long an O-1 can be valid for. And those engagements can change, not drastically, but they can change. So you can add more and change it, as long as it generally isn't a major change, like a material change, they call it. So you can add different engagements, work for several different people. So you don't necessarily have to maintain an H-1B for one employer and an O-1 for another, unless you're doing something drastically different.
Got it. But you do have to let go of H1 even to do this agent-based O1 petition,
That's
right?
right. And mhm.
So in some ways, it's like almost risking what you already have for something potentially better, but then you have to let it go. So you can't, there's no other way around it, right?
That's right. And
Okay.
you could, another option is you could opt for consular processing of your O-1. So that, in order to activate the O-1, you would have to go through the visa process rather than changing your status in the US. Now, of course, let's not talk about the visa process right now because it is
Yeah.
a bit of a mess, but that is setting that aside, that is an option. So, you don't have to necessarily use it. So with USCIS, if you have an H-1B and you have this O-1 petition and you do it for consular processing, it means that it doesn't automatically change you to O-1 once you get approved. You would have to activate it. And USCIS follows the last action rule. So whatever the last action was on your case, that's the status you'll have now. So if you have your H-1B, you got an O-1, you end up getting an O-1 visa, and then you come back to the US and activate it and use your O-1 visa, then you are now on O-1 status. If you change your status back to H-1B, then you're in H-1B status. Sometimes it gets a little tricky with travel and what you end up
Right.
using for travel if you have multiple visas that are valid. But yeah, you
And
would have to pick one.
maybe last question. I'm sorry, I'm taking a little longer time. But just to close that topic, if I do end up getting that O1 petition, but then let's say for whatever reason, let's say H1B becomes more safe or just prefer to be on the H1B, can I still stick to the H1B or do I then have to go with the O1, taking the visa complexity out of it, just the stamping complexity out of it?
Yeah, no, you could stick with the H-1B as long as it's
Okay.
valid and you are still working. Yeah, you can
Okay,
certainly
so
stick
this
with
this
it.
this seems to be a good workaround then, the consular processing, if I understand that right, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay.
Setting aside the challenges with interviews, yes,
Thank you so much for answering the questions. Thanks. Thanks, Nikin.
absolutely. I see a comment here, similar to H-1B, could you have concurrent O-1 petition when there's significant change in plan for a different engagement? You could do several O-1s. That's definitely a thing, if you have different petitioners. But if you have an agent-based O-1, you don't necessarily have to have a second petition. If it's a significant change, then you may want to file an amendment to your O-1 petition, the same way you would have to with an H-1B. So anytime there's what's considered a material change in whatever you initially submitted to USCIS, then you're supposed to submit an amendment. And for itineraries with agent-based O-1s, you don't usually have to amend it because you got an additional job. That's not considered material change. If your time frame changed, if your pay significantly changed, those kinds of things maybe could require an amendment, but that's something an attorney would have to discuss with you, anytime such a change occurs.
Let me ask you a question in the chat, Nusrat, which is, are the cap exempt H-1Bs going to remain the same?
Are the cap exempt H-1Bs going? That's a good question. I believe so. I confess I haven't looked into that particular topic because I don't have very many cap exempt clients, but I believe this only has to do with cap selection in terms of like the weighted, wage weighted selection process. Expand about agent-based O-1 rather than normal O-1. And we have a couple of reasons. Well, let me answer this agent question first really quickly. So you can file for an O-1 petition several different ways. The traditional way is that someone petitions for you. So there's an employer interested in hiring you, and maybe you didn't get selected for the lottery. So they could file an O-1 petition for you if you qualify, and you would be working with them. So they are the petitioner and you're the beneficiary. In an agent-based O-1, and that's who you work for. You don't work for anyone else. That's it. And then somebody else also wants to employ you. They can also file an O-1 petition as your petitioner for you, and you can have multiple concurrent O-1s that way. Or if you were to have an agent-based O-1, then you have several different engagements. There's an agent for purposes of your O-1 petition. They might be an accountant. They might be a different lawyer that's helping you manage and negotiate contracts. People from various professions can act as your agent for purposes of the O-1. And you don't have to have necessarily like any relation with this individual apart from them being a petitioner for your O-1, an agent for your O-1. But they do have some requirements. They have to sign your petition. They have to have a contract with you of some kind or an agreement with you. But those are details that you would get into, once you're ready to file. Okay, so we have a question from Tushar. Please go ahead.
Hi, Nusrat. So for somebody who wants to pursue the entrepreneurial journey, like right now, for instance, I'm on H-1B, I'm building a venture on the side, wanted to understand, and I think it's a little bit along the lines of what Ashish was alluding to on like playing it safe in terms of my current employer has filed for perm application, of course, nearing the 6-year term, want to have that in place for future renewals, but then am I like risking it jumping onto the bandwagon on O-1, or should I also try to figure out something along, the NIW route? Like it's a bit confusing on, I mean, as long as I can keep on staying with my current employer and they don't have an issue, great. But if my current venture becomes real and I want to candidly jump on it full time, what should be the pathway?
Yeah. So if you qualify for EB-1A or EB-2 NIW and you know that you want to immigrate to the United States, then you should go for it, if you qualify. So definitely consider that and have a consultation on that point, because you don't have to have an O-1 before getting an EB-1A or EB-2 NIW. It's not necessary. But in terms of risking your H-1B status, some employers do support O-1 applications. Only you would know. I mean, they might have a policy that they're very open about and communicate about that. Some of the larger corporations will also sponsor for O-1s. Sometimes they have a policy of not sponsoring for O-1s. They'd rather stick with H-1B. I mean, in terms of your perm, that doesn't go away if you're on O-1. And you can continue to work for your employer if you're on your O-1. If, like I said, it's still in line with your work. So, the thing is that with any employment-based petition that your employer is sponsoring you for, they are essentially the owners of that petition. And you have limited access to both the petition and naturally you have limited access to the freedom of movement as well. So you can't really move around jobs and you can't have your own business venture outside of your job either. That wouldn't be permissible. So if you're really interested in the entrepreneurial route and you want to see if you qualify for an O-1 and go the consular processing route, so you don't necessarily have to activate it, you can certainly do that. You should have a game plan in terms of how you can activate it and have a good understanding of what is going on with this like consular kind of mayhem that's happening right now and what you can expect, in terms of a realistic timeline of actually activating your O-1. The other kind of downside to O-1 versus H-1B is, if you have a spouse who isn't on H-1B, on their own H-1B status or their own status independently, then spouses on O-1 unfortunately can't work. So they're permitted to stay in the United States, but they're not permitted to work. So that is a downside. If you have entrepreneurial kind of interests. EB2 NIW can often be a good route if you have a business plan and have like taken some or have some, real kind of concrete steps that you can take towards actually developing that business. And obviously on the larger end of the investment spectrum, there's also EB5, which is a lot more money, but that's something you could do potentially as well. So does that answer your question?
Yeah,
okay.
it definitely does. And just regarding the last point you made, of course, I would love to be in a situation I can do EB5, but not there yet. For NIW, is the intention that the business plan or the forward-looking is evaluated more than like what has been, let's say, past accomplishments or the profile so far? Or is this more judged on what I'm already doing or have already achieved per se? I think that's what I guess what O1 does, right? On the qualifications.
Yeah. It's a bit of everything, and sometimes it all starts to blend together a little bit, and you're like, what's the difference here? And I sometimes suspect that it blends together for adjudicators too, because you can see that they can get a little confused sometimes. But I would say, in my opinion, EB2NAW is a pretty good balance of both what your experience is and your background is, and also what you plan to do in the future, more so than EB1A and O1. And it is, I think, a friendlier towards entrepreneurs than the other categories. It's really, I think it's easier to demonstrate a benefit to the United States and to show that something is important, an important endeavor if you're creating US jobs or contributing to the US economy regionally. It doesn't have to be national per se. So if you can demonstrate through the right kind of market research and a business plan that you can indeed have a positive impact on a region that might be, economically disadvantaged or something, I think it has a stronger impact on likelihood of success.
One last thing on that. So let's say if the profile qualifies for NIW, we apply for it, but would it be my own venture essentially sponsoring, which means I have to transition from, let's say, my current employer H1B to my own venture H1B so that I can continue working on that path?
No. So you have your I-140 then. So the EB2NAW gives you an approved I-140. And, if assuming, so for your situation, you don't have to talk about your situation, of course, if you don't want to, but let's say you don't have a prior approved I-140, so you're just getting like a new priority date, then you understand that you would have to wait for your priority date to become current on the visa bulletin before you could do anything. So you continue to maintain your status. The EB2NIW approval doesn't give you anything else. You have to actually file for a green card application in order to activate it essentially. And it's forward looking. So whatever your status is now, if you don't have status, you don't even have to be in the US to apply for EB2NIW. But you have to intend to do the thing that you said you were going to do, once you get your green card. So if you don't have a prior I-140 that you can pull a priority date from, an earlier priority date, and you're stuck waiting a little bit for the visa bulletin to become current, then whenever it becomes current, you apply for a green card, and then they'll process your green card. And if you were to be called for an interview, which you most likely wouldn't be because most of these types of cases don't get interviewed, you would just have to have some showing that you plan to do the thing that you said you were going to do when you filed the I-140 petition initially.
Understood. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, any other questions?
I know someone who always has questions. Rebecca? Hopefully you're in a place you're able to unmute.
Yeah, I can unmute now. Hi, Nikhil. Hi, Nisra. Thank you for the session. Well, I'm trying to gather. It actually pretty much answered a lot of what I had on my mind. Thank you so much. And, yeah, I will put something in the chat if it comes to my mind.
Absolutely.
Sounds good, Rebecca. How about you, Vishal?
So, funnily enough, I was typing out in the chat, and then Tushar asked like almost verbatim the same question. So I'm in a pretty similar boat. I also want to pursue the O-1 visa for the entrepreneurial journey, but also without having to necessarily give up my current employment because I am on the H-1B. So I guess like in terms of timeline, I'm already on the extension phase where I finished the first 3 years. Now I'm on the second 3 years, but I don't have my approved I-140 yet from my perm application. Um, they said 15 months timeline when I initially petitioned, but it's been about 16, 17 months, and I don't think it'll be for at least another 12 months or so, just with how everything is going. So in terms of like timeline, if I were to pursue this O-1 route, obviously I'm starting on the prep work now just to lay down the foundation. But in terms of actually applying, what would be a suggested timeline?
Yeah, that's a great question. It so much of that depends on your profile. But let's say that in terms of qualifications, you're there. It typically takes a couple of months to prepare an O-1 petition. It's very document heavy, very evidence heavy, the filing, far more complex than an H-1B. I would say on average, it would take maybe 2 to 3 months for the legal petition itself.
Mhm. Okay, so like in terms of like the year, so like let's say like year four of like the H-1B, is that like a good like average between like okay, I'm going for this O-1, but also not necessarily completely rendering my current H-1B ineffective for the remaining 2 years it has. So it's like kind of hedging our bets on which route we want to go.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. You can get an O-1 for up to 3 years at a time. If you wait a long time to activate the O-1, it may, whenever you do activate it, because you have to have an interview at the consulate when you get your O-1 visa stamp, if you go that route.
Hmm.
That question would come up as to like, well, these are outdated. So you would, like your engagements are outdated. So you need to like refresh that information. But we would guide you, or your attorney would guide you on that information. But you can always that timeline would be good because you can request the 3 years. It takes you a couple of months to prepare the petition. You do premium processing. Hopefully, you don't get an RFE, so you get a response in 15 business days. If you do get an RFE, the RFE rates are very high these days, so perhaps you can count on getting an RFE these days. That will add a couple of months to the process as well. And that gives you enough time to continue to maintain your H-1B and see what happens with the O-1. You can also always return, to your H-1B status too. If once you've been selected in, the cap, you don't get counted against the cap again, except for very specific situations.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. I was not aware of that. So it's not like we're necessarily letting go of the remaining timeline on our H-1B.
No, you can
Okay.
always reuse it. Assuming it's not like 10 years later and you've already went abroad, and then it would be a little
Mhm.
bit more difficult to make that argument. But um, if you then like later get approved for an I-140, which is retrogressed, and you're waiting, then you can get those extensions, on an H-1B too, go back to H-1B. So people hop around on statuses a lot. That's quite common.
Okay. Yeah, okay. That actually makes me feel a little bit better. I did actually have a follow-up question though. So you mentioned this whole agent route for the O-1. I'm still trying to understand the terminology. So is that agent O-1 applicable for like founders as well, or is that like, am I thinking of two different things now?
No, you could potentially do it for a founder as well. You could also, I guess, yeah, I think that may be the best route for someone in your position. sometimes people can also, if they have the right status, they can also take part in setting up a business entity
Hmm.
that will hire them, and that business entity can be the petitioner because you'll be working for them. You can be a part owner of that business entity, but typically you need someone with kind of hiring and firing authority involved with that entity to be able to act as your O-1 petitioner. So
I see.
an agent-based O-1, you can still have just like one employer that you plan to work for in your field with the agent. Um, it's it's weird because it's not like the natural way you think of an agent, right? So you remember that O-1s are like you have O-1A and O-1B, and oftentimes people in entertainment use agents, right, to book shows if you're a musician or to book movies and TV shows if you're an actor. Um,
Right, right.
so think of it in that kind of relationship where you have an agent that's negotiating contracts for you, putting your name up for projects, things like that. So that's kind of where you can think of it as that being the origin. But
I see.
yeah, but because of the way the rules are written, it's been expanded to apply to a lot more situations than, this idea of like the entertainment-based agent. So, you have accountants, for example, or like I said, corporate attorneys or contracts attorneys or whomever act as your agent for the purposes of this petition, and you have to have work lined up. It can work really well for like a tech consultant or even if you want to start your own endeavor. But those kinds of details will have to be worked out for sure, as long as it aligns with your background and expertise. Okay, we
Okay.
have, yeah,
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it.
of course. Okay, Tushar, and then looks like we also have Ashish raising. Yep, Tushar first.
So if my current employer, who's filed for perm, or let's put it this way, if I get my priority date, um, is it worth still pursuing the NIW route? Because I guess I already have a date that might precede the the other date that I would get through the NIW route.
Uh, Well, yeah, I mean, right, it's still EB2, right? But the benefit is that you are not tethered to the employer for that EB2 petition. So, if you change jobs and your EB2 priority date then later becomes current, you don't have to wait for the new employer to go through perm all over again. Obviously, even after the end of the perm process, you would keep that priority date, but you would still have to go through the perm process if you change employers. Um, so that's one benefit. It depends on the circumstances, but like I said, if you qualify and you have the background and the intended work for it, then it's generally worth applying. If you're, solid in your position and you don't anticipate, wanting to change what you're doing or change your field or change companies, then perhaps it's not for you. But and it is, quite a bit of it's a commitment and it's an investment to go for any of these like green card categories. So
Right.
yeah, you have to weigh your options.
And how does porting of the priority date work if, let's say, like hypothetically tomorrow I have a date, and I guess I would still have to solve for the fact that if I want to jump on the entrepreneurial route, I'll have to figure out a way to petition myself within my own venture as an H-1B, with my own company kind of porting the date, I believe.
No, no. So the way porting works is it's so easy. It's so simple. It's basically, um, okay, maybe it's not that easy, but it's pretty simple
Not
where,
in this environment.
yeah, yeah. So if you have an I-140, that's approved, as long as it was approved and it's been sitting approved for at least 180 days without an employer trying to withdraw it or revoke it, you have that priority date. And that priority date can be used for any future employment-based petition. not for EB5, but for EB1, EB2, EB3, whatever. You can use that priority date. So you change jobs, you get a new employer, or you change locations, you're in a new geographic location, then you would have to restart the perm most likely, right? Because a perm is location specific and it's job specific. So even though the employer would have to go through the perm process again and the recruitment and all of that, whenever the perm is approved, the priority date for that new perm is going to relate back to your old I-140 once they file the I-140 based on the approved perm, right? So you'll always have that old I-140. So then later on down the line, if you go for EB2NIW or EB1A and, the priority date is not current for EB2, but it is for EB1A, as it is for many people now, then you can go for EB1A and port that old priority date and you're current now, all of a sudden, if you get approved for EB1A and you can get your green card right away. So that's generally how it works.
So you can do the change of status down the road if you think your profile is strong enough for an EB1A.
Exactly, yeah. And the H-1B and the I-140 are kind of independent of each other. I mean, it's different with a perm-based I-140 with your employer you're working for, because you don't have to have an H-1B to have perm. They're two different things. Perm, again, anything to do with these I-140s, they're forward-looking. So the employer, if it's an employer who sponsored you for a position, they have to intend to employ you in that position whenever it's approved and whenever your green card is approved. The H-1B, they have to, employ you in that position for the duration of your H-1B. Two different things. You could have an O-1 and a perm. You could have an L-1 and a perm. Not that you would need it, but you could have any other status and a perm. They're just two different things. So maybe there's some confusion there, but I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it definitely did. And I think that also clarified that even if I have a date at hand, I change employers, I can port the date, but I'm not essentially skipping through the entire perm process. The next employer will still have to go through all of it. They can just revert back to the original date that I got from the prior employer.
Exactly. The exception to that is, let's say you've been waiting a long time and now suddenly your priority date for your EB2 perm is current and you file a green card application, your adjustment of status, and it's pending for 180 days. And then you change jobs. Now you don't have to go through perm again. You can now skip it, but that's only because you filed your adjustment of status and you can now port the whole thing. So the new employer just has to file a really simple kind of addendum to your application and you keep your place in line, your application keeps processing. So that's great, but that's obviously you have to be all the way down the line where your priority date is current to the point where you can file your application.
Right. And an NIW process will skip through essentially labor certification and any of that sort. Plus, I would not be dependent on a employer. It can just be my own venture.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's what it is. It's a national interest waiver, and it's a waiver of the basically of the whole recruitment kind of perm process. So that's what you're asking to waive.
Got it. Thank you.
So yeah, no problem. Ashish, you are next, and then it'll be Rebecca.
Hi, so I have a question regarding the petitioner for O-1. So I know it's not a self-petition, but you can have an self-created company who then hires you and becomes your petitioner to do O-1. Is that a right statement?
It is. I will say that it is a very tricky type of O-1 to do, and it's more often it results in RFEs, but it is certainly possible.
So if I want to open up a company in the long run, and seems like this is an option for me, but then you're saying it's risky as well.
Yeah, so the thing is you're an H-1B, right? So you can have passive income outside of your H-1B employer. but
Mhm.
the role you play with a company is
Right.
limited, because you don't have authorization to do it. If you are an H4, obviously it's different. You don't even have to bother with the O-1. You can do whatever you want if you have an H4 based EAD. But yeah, it's definitely possible. In terms of the risk, I mean, people do them routinely. It's something we could discuss, but if you have another individual that could be involved in that
Mm.
business or that company with you, or
Got it.
sometimes there's a board that you need to have some authority over hiring and firing, because both with agent-based and self-owned,
Mm.
you know, uh, petitioner companies, um,
Mhm.
there, the idea is to make sure that the officer understands you're not just self-petitioning, that there is another legal entity or individual that's actually acting as a petitioner. It's
Got
kind of
it.
a
Makes
fine
sense.
line. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, I know. And let me give you an example and let me know, have you seen a lot of such cases? Let's take a company who's easily firing people these days. Let's take Amazon, right?
Mhm.
Now, if I'm working with Amazon, and I mean, is it something that they explore where I go to them and say, hey, I know my H1B, I have an H1B, but since there's a lot of hiring and firing going on, is it possible for someone like Amazon or equivalent company to do O-1 and become a petitioner, or is that a path they don't normally take?
I mean, they have their own policies, but they definitely have in the past or do petition, act as a petitioner for an O-1 petition. And they may have their own policies as to when they do it and allow it and when they don't. Um, they usually have pretty clear-cut policies. Sometimes, if it's a C-suite or higher position, then they're more open to trying different types of visas, rather than sticking to H-1B, et cetera. But yeah, it definitely happens. And you can also certainly work for an employer, like a single employer like Amazon, if they are willing to provide you with some documentation that they intend to hire you and what rate of
Got
pay
it.
they'll give you and all of that. So they
So
might
that
have
will take
pretty,
out the risk of firing, or for me to be able to go to a different employer, I will not have this dependency then on, let's say, Amazon, right?
if Amazon is your petitioner, then you have to work with them. So
Oh, got it.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, you're
fair
still
enough.
tied to
Yeah,
them.
got it. Makes sense.
Mhm.
Fair enough. Thank you. Thank you, Nuk. That's right.
Yeah, no problem. And Rebecca?
Hey, my question is, assuming my O-1 is filed as a change of status before my current status expires, does
Mhm.
receiving the USCIS receipt notice allow me to remain in the US and work while it is pending, like how we usually do with the H-1B, or is the O-1 treated differently?
Very good question. So you can stay in the US as long as you were in status or in a grace period at the time the change of status petition was filed, but you cannot work under the O-1 until the O-1 itself is approved. So if you have H-1B, that's still valid, but you're just waiting for this O-1 petition, you just continue to maintain your H-1B status. And once you're approved for the O-1 change of status, now you're an O-1 and you have to work according to the O-1.
What if my H-1B expires and my O-1, I filed the O-1 like 2 months before the H-1B expired? What happens in that scenario?
You would just have to wait. You could stay in the US, but you're
Okay.
not permitted to work. Yeah.
Okay, until that's approved. Okay,
Exactly.
got it. Thank you.
Mhm. Any other questions?
So could you speak a bit about like your time at USCIS? Like what runs in the mind of a USCIS officer when they are looking at, let's say, for example, an O1 petition?
Yeah, so I didn't work on O-1 petitions as a USCIS officer, but I think the kinds of experiences that I think are kind of informative in helping to understand the mind of an adjudicator is, um, you know, it is. I had a colleague when I was working for the government that moved to Fragaman, and she pretty quickly became a partner. And We were talking once I joined Fragment about her experience, and she said, you know, Fragment is most like the government that at any job that I've ever had, because it's like an assembly line. You know, you have your blinders on, you do your one thing that you're trained to do, that you're taught to do, and you have high quotas and very strict time requirements, and you have to meet all of those. It's all very closely tracked. So the best advice I could give is, you know, to be succinct and to understand, you know, work with someone that understands the criteria really well and can really just make the point efficiently, quickly, effectively, because that will get the officers' attention, and it makes their job easier. And they always appreciate that because they have a lot of cases to get through. Also, I will say, you know, it's really important to work with a good attorney too, because, you know, people do get reputations with USCIS, and if they see certain names come up with subpar work, they're going to take that case with a little bit of a grain of salt, even though they're absolutely required to take every case on its own merits and understand it. But that, you know, humans have their follies and their biases. So good to work with someone with a good reputation.
I think I inspired like 2 more people to raise their hands.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah.
Nusrat, quick, your thoughts on PR firms. I came across one, Promo Panda, but by no means am I advertising them. I'm just talking about your thoughts on PR firms who help out with this aspect of having articles, publications, or out there. Um, as a as a customer, it seems more like if I do that in the 6 months and then I apply for O1, it feels like I've rigged the system. Um, your thoughts, like, do you see it the same way? Does US your thoughts on how USCIS would see it? And yeah, would you recommend doing something like that or no?
Yeah, so I definitely have very strong thoughts about this because this does come up a lot. So, you know, with PR, it's like you have to think about, I'm going to take it back to this like entertainment kind of idea. So back in the day before this was like very common knowledge, um, like let's say an actor comes to a lawyer and says, I want to try for the O-1. And I'll say, okay, well, it looks like you have a kind of a medium case, but if you want to strengthen your case, try to get more exposure, try to, you know, get more press or
Mm,
whatever. And they
right.
might work with a PR firm that helps them to potentially get more opportunities to have more press. So the line here is number one, you need transparency. So you never want to cross that line of misrepresentation. And because that's obviously illegal, it's not how it's done, it's not correct, and it can only hurt you. And it's pretty easy to find out this kind of information too. Not that that's why you shouldn't do it, but it's not too difficult to figure out what is maybe paid PR and what's actual press. So a PR agent can work in several different ways. They can, you know, look at your work. Let's say you're an artist, they can push your work and, you know, pitch it to various like journals or publications and say, this artist is brilliant, you should really do a feature on them. And because they've worked with various writers who they have a relationship with, the writer needs something to write about, they need to push out content, they might take up the case and pitch it to their editorial board and publish it. What's not okay is if you hire a company and they pay someone $500 to publish an article for you, and then you say that article was published about you just on its own merit. That's misrepresentation, right? So it's how it's done is really important. Transparency is really important. And anytime you're paying for evidence, that's bad. That's a bad sign. So that shouldn't be happening. But there are ways where you can, you know, pay for the labor that creates situations where you can get the evidence that you need that enhances your profile, because it's really based on merit. It's based on you and how good you are. So you might have needed a PR person to push the story to get someone to publish it, but it was your work that they were interested in and why they published it, not because they got paid something to publish it. Paid PR is not allowed. It's just, it doesn't count for the criteria. But the other problem that comes along with it is misrepresentation of saying that you got a news article published about you because of how great you are, but it was actually published because you paid someone to publish it, even by proxy.
Got it. But let's take an example. Obviously, paid one felt very fake. And I'm talking about tech cases, tech background. I know what you mentioned was originally for artists, but let's take an example of a tech where we have some post, I have some post and stuff, blogs, but really not the kind of following that someone scholarly article and would have had. In that case, they help promote this. And so obviously the impressions or the spread is wide. And again, we are just talking about the real, uh, in some cases, it's like SEO for my brand. Even then, would you say it sounds um, not right? Or would you then say that's fine and it really helps? Or you would say it's fine, but it really doesn't help?
You have to just go through the criteria and it can't be
Hmm.
paid. So that's the line. The line is pretty clear there. So if you paid for it, you can't use it. If you didn't pay for it and it's not that great a publication, then
Hmm.
we can make an argument for it. And that's where the lawyering comes in. So you can say that this is important in this field and you can make
Hmm.
arguments saying why this qualifies. Not every person needs every criteria and it's not meant for everyone. So the reason I bring up
Right.
artists is because, there's a, like a box office receipts. That's not going to apply
Right.
to you, right? But it's still
Right.
there. Does that mean you
Right.
have to generate some fake report about? No, of course not. So
Right.
that's the idea. It's meant to be flexible. It's meant to encompass a lot of different fields and a lot of different professions. And this, it's best to focus on what makes you unique and individual when you're
Mhm.
going for these kinds of categories, because that's what the officer is looking for. They
Got it.
review, like I said, they review so many petitions every day. And if, like, I forget the name of the company you mentioned, but whatever it is, if they're seeing the same publications come up in these like somewhat maybe poorly written articles, and it's a picture of like you that you took yourself and it's repeated in like several different articles, like they're not, you know, they're not stupid. So,
Yeah,
you have to give them some credit. So, yeah, just keep that
fair
in mind.
enough. Fair enough. And
And you
and
don't need it.
okay, yeah, that's kind of where I was. That's the feeling I got after talking to them. But yeah, I just wanted to make sure. And then the social media. I know with H1 there is a huge check happening with social media and anything that you put out there, which can be
Hey,
considered.
Ashish, don't mean to interrupt, but we are coming up on time, and
That's okay.
I want
That's
to
okay.
make sure someone else gets
Never
an
mind.
opportunity to ask a
For
question.
sure. Yeah, go
And
ahead.
happy to continue the conversation in our Slack community. So no sweats
Absolutely.
that
Thanks
you
again.
can ask any questions there. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks again.
Appreciate you engaging.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay,
please go
Vishal.
ahead, Vishal.
Mhm.
Sorry, I don't mean to take up your last few moments, but kind of going back to our previous conversation, what I'd love to know is like what steps can I be actively working on while on H-1B while waiting for an O-1 visa application for the founder route? So I know like we can do things like establishing the entity, like business plans, bank accounts, these kind of like pre-work steps are allowed. Uh, I was wondering if you could kind of expand on that a little bit. And really, what I want to know is it allowed to have some stipulations where I can create a contract while creating this entity that I will take over as like CEO or whatever when the time comes that the O-1 is approved? But until then, the organization will run with the board and, the organization will continue to run until the point where I get my O-1 visa approved when I will take over as CEO. Is that kind of contract stipulations allowed, or is that kind of rigging it?
No, no, it that can be allowed. It's certainly something we'd have to look very carefully at and tweak just to make sure that there's nothing that could be interpreted as you violating your status. Um, and it has to be like a real kind of alternative, like it's not like a given that you're actually in charge, but it's, perhaps on paper you're not. That's
Mhm.
totally fine. In fact, for O1 agent petitions, when you have to submit an itinerary showing where you're going to work for the next, 3 years, and if it's approved, and you're supposed to submit contracts like that. So it's part of the application process. And not just contracts, it could be just like a deal memo, sometimes it's called, or non-binding kind of agreement. I mean, some of it's is doesn't make a lot of sense the way it's phrased. But basically, it doesn't have to be a binding contract. It can be essentially a kind of non-binding offer of employment. It should
Okay.
describe what you're going to be doing, where you're going to be doing it. So you may have to do that anyway to submit the petition.
Okay. Gotcha. All right. Thank you.
Mhm.
Awesome. We are at time. Thank you all so much for taking the time joining us today evening, and most importantly, for engaging with questions and a vibrant discussion. Thank you so much, Nusrat, for providing so many insights and feedback from your experience. The one thing I do want to note is none of this, I mean, just for informational purposes only, none of this is legal advice. That's something you receive once you enter into attorney-client privilege, right? So you have a consultation call with an attorney, you get an engagement letter, and then it becomes legal advice. But in case, for informational purposes, you do have further questions, please feel free to join our community, ask questions there. This will be there taking some time out of a day over the next week or so to give feedback and help you get some more answers. And once again, really, really appreciate you taking the time, Nusrat. And for those of you who have been coming regularly to our workshop series, next week we'll go back into some O-1 criteria as well. Every week we cover a few criteria. Then we bring on experts such as Nusrat, recipients, and such. It's a free series. Again, it's for informational purposes only, but hopefully it helps you understand the O-1 requirements in more detail and guide you towards starting your developing your profile. Have to each and every one of you, have a great week ahead. And thank you all once again for participating, engaging, and making this workshop series a success.
Thank you all. Thank you so much, Nikin.